Welcome to Evangelicalish, where we discuss the good, the bad, and the ugly of the American evangelical church, deconstruction, faith, and God's love through it all. Remember, if you're listening to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or any of your favorite podcast platforms, let us invite you to join the live interactive recording most Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific on the Evangelicalish YouTube channel. Now to this episode of Evangelical-ish.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Evangelical-ish again. I'm still not used to having that cool music. Just kind of want to jam every time
We're funky.
We're funky. I do feel obligated to tell everybody that it's my birthday.
Oh, I was going to surprise you with that, but okay. Beecher says you've eaten some cookie brownies instead of birthday cake.
My mom, who lives next door, she baked me some. They're apparently like a brownie cookie mix. Like it's like cookie dough and brownie mix. It was pretty good. I'm not complaining.
I think we have those at one of the restaurants in town. They have Pizookies or something like that. It's like a cookie brownie something or other. But happy birthday!
No, thank you very much.
29 today. Yay.
Well, you know what? We'll go with that. I like that better than the truth I was about to say. My father-in-law, and for the record, my father-in-law is a jokester.
Okay.
I'm 36. I turned 36. I'll say it. But he texted me today and said, "Happy 40th, April."
Oh.
And I said, "Hold up. I'm not 40 yet. Let a girl breathe." And then he goes, "Oops, sorry." But I do think he was probably joking because he is a jokester, but he's also like in his 60s. So I don't know if he fully knows text. Like he didn't put an LOL or an emoji or anything to like let me know he was joking. So I'm going to hope that he was joking, but whatever, it's just a number. So I'm fine.
Just a number. But you should have been born in April. It would have been.
I have got that my entire life.
Yeah.
They'd be like, "Oh, April, are you born in April?" I'm like, "No." And they're like, "Well, when were you born?" I say February. I'm like, "Oh, good thing your parents didn't name you February." Like that exact interaction has happened.
Or as a professor of mine used to say, February. February. Well, happy birthday. We're so happy you were born. And these brownies were just brownies, right? They weren't.
My mom made brownies. Them. Who's a good Christian woman, so They were just regular brownies. Very yummy. So anyway, welcome to Evangelicalish. We have a really awesome guest tonight. Just some quick housekeeping. Paul and I met with Jeremy earlier today, and he's alive and doing well. And
he's in heaven because he was raptured. But
that's right. We visited heaven to say hello.
Our Christians going to be pissed when they find out he's there.
Yes, but yes, all's well on that front. And please, I would love if you are listening or are watching right now, and you have not left us a review on Apple. If you listen on Apple, please go leave us a review because our last review is from a while ago, and I just like seeing new reviews every once in a while, and that just makes me happy. Make me happy for my birthday, and go leave us a review. Thank you.
It helps promote our content out to the rest of the world. So that would be great.
But I am really excited about our guest tonight. Paul, will you tell us who we are?
My wife and I got to go see a special screening in town where we live the other night of God and Country, which is a Rob Reiner produced film about Christian nationalism. And it really left us shaken. And our guest tonight is one of the expert commentators, Reverend Dr. Rob Schenck, an ordained evangelical minister that works with the Dietrich Bonhoeffer Institute in Washington, D.C., and a leader among American evangelicals. Even had a 2-year term as chairman of the Evangelical Church Alliance, holds a BA in religion, and is the subject of Abigail Disney's Emmy-winning documentary examining evangelicals and the gun culture, The Armor of Light. Rob Schenck, Reverend Rob, joins us now. Hey, Rob, good evening. Glad you're with us.
Good evening. Thanks very much for having me. And I'll update you a little bit on the bio. Finally, in midlife, I finally did the MA and then did a DMin at age 50, which
Oh,
is a
wow.
great age to do a doctorate. I was afraid of it and thought I haven't done this kind of work in decades. And I did it, and I'm so glad I did it in my 50s. So if anybody's out there thinking it's too late, it's not too late. And further update, we merged the Dietrich Bonhoeffer Institute with a wonderful organization, actually a wonderful institution, the Miller Center for Interreligious Learning and Leadership at Hebrew College outside Boston, which is a marvelous pluralistic, I call them progressive, they don't like the term, they prefer pluralistic institution. And I just got off with an hour and a half with that, and now I'm rolling into you guys. So this is an endless night of fun and intellectual and spiritual stimulation. So thanks for the invitation.
Thank you so much for being here.
And you are a star of stage and screen, so much in demand today. And Rob is on the movie God and Country, and we're going to talk about how you got involved in that project. But one of the things the movie does really well is tells a story that I don't think a lot of people know. A lot of evangelicals I know don't know, and I didn't know till a few years ago, how much Roe v. Wade, when it came in 1973, Protestants really weren't that jacked up about it. But then in the late 70s, some maybe amoral men or morally shady people decided to weaponize that issue. And really that is part of very much at the heart of Christian nationalism today, the weaponizing of that issue, I think. And that's an issue you were very much involved in early in life, or a while back in life, as Norma McCorvey, right? You took her around the country. She was Roe from Roe v. Wade, and she recanted of being involved in that. Tell us about that story, if we could start there.
Sure. Well, actually, I always hosted Norma here in Washington, D.C., where I've been based for coming on 30 years. And Norma always came my way, although I was with her in many other places across the country, because we would find ourselves doing the same stuff in the movement. And if Norma McCorvey is a name that doesn't ring a bell with folks, certainly Jane Roe does. And that was her AKA, her also known as, for the big case in 1973. At the time, Norma was a single mother. And
if I can interrupt, just to make clear, you were part of the pro-life or anti-abortion movement at that time.
Very much so. Very much so. I spent 30 years in that movement. I was baptized into it by fire. In other words, the day I joined up, I was also arrested for blockading the door to a clinic in my hometown of Buffalo, New York, and it goes on from there. It would eventually take me to Washington, D.C., where I would work for 25 years with Congress, with a couple of White Houses, and I would say now, most regrettably, behind the scenes with Supreme Court justices, encouraging them to bring about the most severe opinions they could muster on this topic. So that's what I did. And I met Norma in that context. In fact, I got a call one day from a colleague, a co-leader in the movement, who said Norma had just been baptized in a backyard swimming pool in Texas. And that was, in the way I saw the world at that time, an answer to years and years and years of prayer and work, because Norma was the icon of the pro-choice movement. The big case legalizing abortion, Roe v. Wade, was named for her as Jane Roe, anonymously. But I we all knew her as Norma McCorvey, and a buddy of mine who was a leader in the movement had befriended her. He had moved his headquarters office next to the abortion clinic where she was the marketing director, and they got to know one another. And this is something that's important for people to know about Jane Roe, Norma McCorvey. She was of course, a very complex person, just like all of us, and maybe, exaggerated 10, 100-fold. There were lots of different aspects to Norma, and her whole life had been a struggle for survival. She was born into an extremely abusive home, physically, psychologically, and sexually. She was remanded to a girls' what did they call those homes in the 50s and 60s? Like a rehabilitation. Oh, I'm 65. I should know. We used this term when I was a kid, but I'm also starting to have the memory of the new grandfather.
A girls' home. A girls' home. Yeah.
Yeah, girls' home. And it was a form of punishment, confinement, and usually, a torturous environment. And she only escaped when she ran off with a teenage boy, eventually married him. He was physically abusive, punched her, strangled her, raped her. And so you have to see Norma in that context, because every day was a bid for survival. So she was celebrated in the pro-choice movement for obvious reasons, but always felt that she was kind of pushed to the margins a little. She was quite rough. She was a rough gal, could be very saucy, sarcastic, and challenge all the boundaries, including on the stage for pro-choice groups. So they eventually denied her the microphone, put her in the eaves rather than on the main stage. And all of this built resentment in her.
Shocking that even activists with good intentions can use people and then push them aside from time to time.
And I think all movement people, all sides, have learned things.
Humans, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're going back, dare I say 50 years ago? I mean, come on, what? 51 years ago? And further, because now we're talking her worst years were in the mid to late 60s. So things were very bad for women all around during that time. They were getting a little better on the liberal side of things, but not always the greatest. And long story short is she meets Flip Benham, this street preacher who had owned a bar and was a bartender before his, miraculous conversion and born again experience, which turned him into a Free Methodist evangelist. And I say all that because they had some things in common, Norma and Flip. And she fell in like with him. There's a story about a child inviting her to church. She went. She tells the story in a book about how she felt the warmth of God's presence, was born again, became a Christian, was baptized in that backyard pool. And I would bring her to Washington, D.C. for a carefully choreographed reveal as the new Norma, the pro-life Norma, although she wasn't entirely pro-life. And we knew that, and we had to kind of, manage that, and we did. But that's how Norma came into my world. And I grew to love her, and I miss her to this day. Um, I co-officiated at her funeral.
Mm.
It was a very, very moving experience for me, and I think a lot about her. But at the end of her life, she did another big reveal that the whole time she had held to her pro-choice uh, internal convictions, and
Mhm.
that she told the world that she had put this on with the help of people like me,
Mm.
who from time to time paid her to make pro-life speeches. She desperately needed the money. Um, I I have my own views of that, but I'm honoring her. That's what she told us. I'm gonna take her at her word, uh, and and there's been a couple of television, film, and book treatments of this, which is worth
Mhm.
reading.
Yeah.
Um, so, especially Josh Prager's book, Family Row. It's a tome. You
Mhm.
got to be committed. It's a thick one.
Okay.
It tells a great story.
Can I ask, so obviously I'm sure you have a lot of conflicting emotions looking back on that part of your life, knowing where you are now, which is not there. Um, what what were some of the things that changed your mind? Like, how did you go from being pro-life, very pro-life, to I'm assuming you're pro-choice now. Like what were those things? Because I was also Paul and I too, like very much in the pro-life movement. And like I only had ever been taught like a very sensationalized view of what abortion is. It's like, killing a baby at 9 months, full term pregnancy. Like what kind of evil person would want that? Like that's the narrative that you're taught. Like, well, obviously obviously I'm against that. Um, so like what were the things for you that got you out of that movement?
Well, a few things. I remember there was a moment in time. I was in jail. I did a lot of jail time in the abortion, um, you know, what we called rescue movement, which involved physically blockading doors of clinics,
Mhm.
driveways into their parking lots, um, and so on. Uh, Directly engaging people coming and going from abortion clinics on sidewalks, etc. And so I was arrested many times and jailed. This was a little different. I was in Montgomery, Alabama, and I got a lot of penance to do, and this is Lent, so this is the season for it. So I guess I will make my confessions, and I feel very safe with the two of you because you have lived this life and you know it.
Mhm.
And thank you for giving me that space.
Mhm.
But when I was jailed in Montgomery, the facility I was in was overpopulated. So they put me in solitary confinement on the psych ward, which, of course, all my fellows had great fun with. That's where Schenk belongs. But anyway, um, it was a very, very sad place.
Mm.
Curiously, it was co-ed. There were men and women on the psych wing. And, there wasn't always modesty going on. So for a evangelical fundamentalist leaning preacher, it was a little uncomfortable to say the least, but I was there. And while we were all in solitary cells, didn't have physical contact with each other, there was enough open space that you kind of shared the air, at least
Mhm.
with everybody.
Mhm.
And there was a woman on that cell block who, the entire time I was there, was screaming and pleading. And I remember her just repeating over and over again, "Where are my babies? Who has my babies? I have 3 kids. Who's taking care of my kids? Where are my babies? Who's with my babies?" And she was shrieking. She had all the protective instincts of a mother, screeching for somebody to help her children. Nobody came to her. Nobody.
Mm.
Not a guard, not a social worker, and most certainly not a rosy-cheeked pro-life sidewalk counselor.
Mm.
And I say that because I had convinced myself that no woman needed to pursue an abortion because everything she needed for her and for her child would be provided. We had volunteers aplenty. We had diapers in boxes we would be happy to share with her. We had doctors willing to provide medical care for mother and child without charge. We had everything she needed, bottles. We had teething keys, you name it. We had it all. And any woman who needed it, we would provide it for her. But nobody arrived at the Montgomery County Jail to help this woman. And April, to go to your question, it broke a spell in me.
Mm.
And I realized in my own mind, I had written a fiction that I had lived with for 20 plus years. And in that imagination, in that imaginative scenario, a woman like this would scream, "My babies," and suddenly these rosy-cheeked, lovely, born-again women would just show up, all of them white, by the way, and
Mhm.
they would come to this woman's aid and her baby, and they would live life happily ever after.
Mm.
And sitting in that filthy cell,
Mhm.
filled with body fluids on the walls, I thought, they're not coming. And they never will come to this woman. There will never be that circle of instant care. And it troubled me, it shook my foundations, but I did what I did a lot of in those days. I compartmentalized it,
Yeah.
segmented it in my brain, put it up on a shelf, and said, someday I'll attend to that. And 10 years went by.
Wow.
And that
Wow.
thing just grew mold on
Mm.
a mental shelf. So that was one little thing. And there were others, but I have a tendency to filibuster, which is a
Yeah.
bad Washington habit. So I won't keep doing that.
Well,
I
that's
know
a
you want to explore other things.
That's a
Mhm.
powerful story. And, for me, I was never energized by the abortion issue. And I was around a lot of people that it meant a lot to. And it sort of was like, okay, God, why doesn't this fire me up? Why do I care more about, making life better for people that are living in my community? And did a crazy thing and read the Bible. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the Bible actually talks way more about taking care of people in my community and says nothing about abortion. One of the things the movie God and Country tells, and our guest Rob Schenck is a commentator in that movie, is about how this started with sort of a battle between, and I don't know what your perspective is on the story, but Jerry Falwell Sr. And men like Bob Jones, who had Christian universities and were being forced to integrate their universities by the Carter administration, probably the most Christian president we've had in my lifetime. And a political operative named Paul Weyrich, who I see somebody mentioned in the comments there, comes along and says, hey, segregation is not a great issue for Christians, but we can weaponize abortion and we can start to manipulate their votes. And what was your perspective on that when all of that was happening? And as you look back at that, is it true, you think, that in some ways racism was right at the heart of this movement to move evangelicals to right-wing voting in politics?
Well, there's both a simple and more complex answer as I see it. And that is, there's a phenomenon that has taken place in American evangelicalism over the last 50 to 60 years that has been a very long-term and consequential project. I call it the Southernization of American evangelicalism. And I draw that after reading the excellent work of Charles Reagan Wilson, no relation to the president of that name, but he is a Southern historian par excellence, one of the greatest scholars on the post-Civil War era at University of Mississippi, UMass. He's quintessentially a man of the South and a brilliant scholar. And he's written a number of books, but the one that really got to me was Baptized in Blood, The Religion of the Lost Cause.
Mm.
And he goes carefully into this phenomenon where those who lost the pre-Civil War South and slavery and the life, the culture and lifestyle that went with it, co-opted the churches and the message of Christianity as a way of bringing that back into American life in spite of the victory of the Union and what they saw as the repression of Southern culture. Now, a lot of good comes out of the South. In fact, some of the great civil rights leaders came out of the South. So I'm not bad-mouthing Southerners here. I'm talking about a peculiar institution, which is what they used to call slavery. It's a peculiar cultural phenomenon, which is to advance that old culture of white supremacy writ large.
Mm.
And it made its way, if you look at the New England evangelicals of the 18th century, mid-19th century. Tell me when I'm boring everybody. Just
I'm in it.
You're starting to bore our audience.
No, it's interesting.
They were abolitionists. They were women's rights advocates. I remind people that the first women's voting rights conference was held at an evangelical church in Seneca Falls, New York. They were of a different species than what we know American evangelicalism to be today. And I like to say there are some good evangelicals. You named one of them, Jimmy Carter, still identified as an evangelical. Now what, just on the eve of 100? I voted for him. I cast my first vote for president for Jimmy Carter. Why? Because he was born again, because he took the Bible seriously, and because he modeled the life of Jesus, taking care of the poor, the lonely, the alienated, the sick. That's what I thought a Christian should be, and that's what I thought a Christian president should be. Now we're looking at the diametric opposite. So, yes, I was part of the co-optation of American evangelicals by the forces that you're describing, who started their culture wars project in the late 1960s, not over abortion, not even over homosexuality or same-sex marriage. They started it over the right of churches, principally in the South, to create their own schools so that they could avoid the problem of desegregation. They wanted segregated schools. How could you do that? By creating church schools. And many of the same actors started showing up in and around, evangelical conferences in the North. And suddenly, and I remember getting the call. I remember sitting in my apartment. My wife was pregnant with our daughter, which would have put it in 1978. 1978,
Okay.
eons ago, before time was, and getting the call on the phone. Where are you on abortion? I said, where am I on abortion? At that time, I'm directing a home for recovering heroin addicts. I got a lot on my mind other than that. Why do you ask? Because you're an evangelical minister, and we have to fight this battle. And if you're not doing that, then you're not being true to the gospel. And the whole recruitment effort started. That was 1978. I wouldn't join the movement till 1988, but I witnessed it. I watched it. I would eventually connect with Jerry Falwell Sr., who was part of this. I sat many times with Paul Weyrich. Yeah, I knew all the actors, the Ralph Reeds of Christian
Yeah.
Coalition.
If I can jump in to remind people, you say 78, you got that call. Roe v. Wade passed in 73. It was not a big issue. Even the Southern Baptists, Billy Graham, were saying it was a compassion issue. It was a Catholic issue. Abortion was not an all-time Christian issue. It is a politicized issue.
Even the SBC, the Southern Baptists, were pretty much indifferent on abortion, if not pro-choice. Like the president of First Baptist Dallas, which is now MAGA preacher Robert Jeffries. But when W.A. Criswell was the president, he had released a statement that he didn't see why a woman should not be allowed to have an abortion.
And in fact, Criswell, who, was a giant luminary in American evangelicalism at that time, actually fundamentalism to be more correct. I have quite the inside information. He was quite liberal in his internal sensibilities. So all that to say, this has always been complicated, and it gets right to this point because everybody learned first to capture voters for political power. You have to have a simple, very two-dimensional, singular focal point. And it has to be really simplistic. It has to be good or evil, right or wrong, wonderful or horrendous.
Yeah.
Nothing in between. There's no nuance.
Yeah.
There's no complexity. There's nothing unique. Everything is the same. The same formula applies to every person in every circumstance at every moment.
Yeah.
And April, you were saying, the way abortion was portrayed made it the perfect, example of this. And that's exactly how it was played. And now I will say, when I first joined the movement in 1988, I did it quite naively. The people surrounding me at that time were mostly Catholic workers. These were anti-nuke, anti-war, anti-death penalty people. They were taking care of the poor. They were running refugee centers on the border. They were running, homeless shelters, food pantries, you name it.
So they were like holistically pro-life.
They were what was then called seamless garment people. You take care of the whole person, not just at a particular time in human development. But that would not last long. When the other forces came in, they vanquished these people. They aren't even part of the narrative now. And what it became was save the baby, which basically meant prohibit the woman from making any other choice except full pregnancy and birth. And then you can walk away because you can feel very good about yourself.
Yeah.
It was not about the other. It was not about the woman in crisis. It was not about the child about to be born into crisis. It was about me. Made me feel moral, made me feel like
Yeah.
a moral hero, made me look good, made me feel good about myself.
Hmm.
That's contrary to the Christian message. The
Oh my
Christian
gosh.
message is you give yourself wholly to the other. It's not about you, it's about the other. And so that was part of the process, and ultimately the politicization and co-optation of the movement.
And to see, and maybe this is why I never got too much into the movement, you know, people screaming at young women going into a doctor's office and yelling murderer at her, and her having to have security guards come around her and good-hearted people and protect her going in. I'm like, I don't care what your belief is. And I do believe there are good people who believe they're saving a baby's life. But that's why I want to inform them of all of this, and that Christ would have nothing to do with that whatsoever. Another good book on this that I recommend to people is a book called It Was All a Lie by a man named Stuart Stevens. And he was a Republican operative in the late 60s, early 70s. And after Barry Goldwater took a serious thrashing in the 1964 election, the Republicans were like, hey, we've got to get Black people to vote for us. And so they were trying to figure out, how do we get Black people to vote for us? And they lost a couple more elections, and then they said, oh, Black people aren't going to vote for us. So we have to go, and this is to your point of the Southernization of the church, we have to go get white Southern voters if we ever want to win another election. And Stuart Stevens in that book says, we made a conscious choice. We would use racist dog whistles to reach out to Southern Christian voters. We would use abortion to reach out to Southern Christian voters. And Ronald Reagan, who signed the most liberal pro-abortion law in the state of California in the history of the United States, suddenly became an anti-abortionist and ran against Jimmy Carter, and the rest is history. And he's talking about welfare moms, and then George H.W. Bush is talking about Willie Horton, and they used very explicit racist tones to get Southerners to vote, and adding abortion into that. So it really has been a mixture of a lot of issues that I think some very, very good-hearted, fervent people who believe they're doing something godly by being anti-abortion as their single issue to vote, I don't think know the whole impetus behind how the church suddenly became this political action committee it is today.
And you bring back to mind an experience I had sitting in the inner office of a Southern member of Congress, in fact, from the Deep South. And I, in my naive days, I said, every time we do a pro-life news conference, we always have a phalanx of middle-aged white men. Why don't we bring women and people of color and put them forward? And his retort to that was, and what would that gain us? That ain't going to get us a single vote. Forget it. Bad idea. Next, let's go on. It was that vivid. And it goes to precisely that, because what this became in a very short period of time was the pursuit of power by suppressing the real questions, first about the needs of women and of children. Isn't it interesting that some of the states now that are passing the most severe anti-abortion legislation, it's not just anti-abortion, it's anti-gynecological care. It's
contraception,
or just miscarriage care.
Yes, miscarriage care. pregnancy care.
And by the way, Rob, and now Alabama has ruled frozen eggs from in vitro care are human beings.
And let's go to that immediately, because it proves this point precisely. If you look at that ruling by the Alabama Supreme Court that frozen, emphasize, frozen embryos are children in the eyes of the state, that begs an enormous number of questions. But among them, just a few weeks ago, wasn't it, that the governor of Alabama signed into law a restriction that makes it a felony for a doctor to treat a child with any hormonal care, but especially any designed to facilitate transitions.
Yeah.
It's now a felony in Alabama. Now, isn't that curious? A doctor can't treat a child with hormone therapy. If he or she does, they will be prosecuted as a felon and sent to prison.
And by the way, a parent can't make that choice for their child.
That's right. So now they have separated parental care and parental custodianship. So they've fractured the family, but they've made it fully legal instantly to use cryogenics, freezing a child. I'm just saying, according to their opinion,
right,
at a certain stage of life. You can't administer hormones to guide their bodies in terms of sexual identity.
You can make them an icicle.
But you can freeze them in time.
Yeah.
What?
And by the way, that is saying that's a human being. I don't think any of us can be frozen and brought back to life.
No.
Right.
No human being can do that.
No. And now it begs the question, even if they could, if that embryo, first of all, now by law must be preserved. Well, what if the company that's has charge of them goes out of business? All the principals die, all the investors dry up. What's the state going to do with
the power outage?
The next thing they're going to do is criminalize spilling your seed, because that's just as much a child as those frozen embryos.
Now we're going back to the Griswold decision of 1967, which paved the way for Roe. And I heard many times while I was in the movement, Roe is only the beginning. We've got to get to Griswold, because without getting to Griswold, which was a case out of Connecticut, where the state of Connecticut banned married couples from using birth control or even possessing it. And Griswold, they say, was the break in the dam that gave way to Roe v. Wade and then Doe versus Bolton, which unleashed, what we knew as, legal abortion under the previous regime until Dobbs' decision. So all that to say, Griswold is on the list, is on the agenda, which would roll back all rights to controlling your fertility, your reproduction, birth, and all the rest. So I know, I saw it when Handmaid's Tale came out, Margaret Atwood's novel.
Yeah.
I thought it was, pardon me, I'm sorry, I'm making my confessions. This is the booth. You're both my priests. I saw it as histrionic, literally and figuratively histrionic. It was hyperbolic. It was preposterous. I'm not so sure anymore.
I used to really like watching Handmaid's Tale because I just like dark sci-fi shows because I don't know why, escape reality. But now it's almost too realistic to watch after Roe's been overturned and you have, the ruling in Alabama. It's just and it's very rich coming from people that are, it's a way of control, but a lot of these are the same people that refuse to take the jab, the vaccine, because they said that was too much control over their lives because it's their freedom. You can't tell them what to do with their body. Which I agree. Like, I think people should choose whether or not they get a vaccine or not, just like I think people should be able to choose whether or not they get an abortion. But you have these two conflicting, on one hand, Christian nationalists are all about freedom, my rights. It's my right to have a gun. It's my right to worship as I please. It's religious liberty, religious freedom. But really what that means is Christian freedom, specifically white evangelical Protestant Christian freedom. But then on the other hand, it's rules, and captivity for basically anyone who doesn't think like them. And what do you think is what is driving this decision? Like, what do these people get out of forcing everybody everywhere to have all the babies?
Wow. I'm not a psychotherapist, but I'm
Right.
married to one. I think I'm her most
That qualifies you then.
I am her most challenging client. Not really. I have to remind her I'm your
I
wife.
always say I'm not a therapist. I've been in therapy for so long, I feel like I am.
Well, and April asked, what helped me make this part of my journey. Part of it was therapy, first by a born-again, Bible-believing, thoroughly evangelically trained therapist who helped me greatly. And then other therapists, and I've always chosen evangelicals, therapists who identify as evangelical, helped me enormously. And there was another moment in time, April, going back to that question of yours, which is so much a part of this story, was when I heard someone very opposite from the woman I had encountered at the Montgomery County Jail, a very wealthy, highly educated woman who narrated her abortion story to me. And as she did, I came to the realization, first of all, and this is going to be like keen sense of the obvious, pal, duh. Of course, I watched my wife go through 2 pregnancies. I was present at the birth of both of my children. And I should have known this, but I didn't because I'm a troglodyte in so many ways. But it was like an aperçu, like an epiphany that just like every human being is unique, every pregnancy is unique. Every woman, of course, is unique. Every experience of a woman with pregnancy is unique. Every crisis, pregnancy, crisis during the time of pregnancy is unique. Every family dynamic is unique. Every story of conception is unique. You can't apply a blanket rule on any of this.
Yeah.
One formula, one rule, one law cannot address something as unique as human conception, human pregnancy, the relation of a woman to her pregnancy, the birth of a child, the child, herself, himself, themselves. Everything is unique. How dare you say that we can come up with a rule that applies to every person in every circumstance at every moment of time? Impossible. And that was part of that revelation. But there was a little, can I give you just an asterisk?
Yeah.
Go for it.
Because there was a little theological problem here. First of all, during that same period of time, it dawned on me, all of our talk of Christian values, Christian family, Christian marriage, Christian respect for the sanctity of human life and all the rest, I thought, well, first of all, Jesus was never a Christian.
That's so true.
Jesus was never a Christian. It wasn't until much later that disciples of Jesus were called Christian. And then we came up with our own definitions of Christian in the year 286, in the year 435, and
Yeah.
on it goes to the present day, where we have redefined Christian and Christianity over and over and over again. So now Christian nationalists define Christians politically.
Yeah.
You have to have a particular view of your country, of
The Second Amendment.
patriotism, of Second Amendment,
Yeah.
which I'd like to get to in a minute in a very dramatic way. All the rest,
Yeah.
a particular party, and now the party doesn't matter. The personality at the pinnacle of the party matters. So you got to love this guy. Never mind Jesus. What do you,
Yeah.
okay. Jesus is your Lord on Sunday, and when your eyes are closed and people are singing, this is the Lord in the real world, and his name is Donald.
Mm.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry to interrupt, but you said something
Please.
earlier that applies to what April was asking there about, and I may misquote you, but there is a self-righteousness in being pro-life. I don't have to really do anything as a Christian. I can vote for Donald Trump, and that makes me godly. That makes me a part of the club that is God's favorite club in God's favorite country. Is there something of a selfishness of, I want some points with God without having to really do anything? I can just vote Republican and therefore I'm good.
Well, it's a whole lot easier. Don Jr. said it. He said it to a room full of evangelicals in Arizona, when he said, I know, I get it, turn the other cheek thing. I get the religious, whatever. I'm not quoting him verbatim, but it was very much, I get the religious, sensibilities about that. But it's gotten us nowhere. In other words, Jesus has gone from being Lord and Savior and model to a problem, because he contradicts everything that other earthly Messiah, that false Messiah, is spouting. And that goes to the show and tell. Do we have time for it?
Yeah, we
Yes.
can do that.
Yeah,
You
show and
mind?
tell.
Let's do it. Show us.
It's your
And also
platform.
explain what it is for the people that are going to be listening to this.
Sure. Okay. Yes, I will. Well, evangelicals have a kind of almost custom, first of all, of carrying paper Bibles, paper-bound Bibles. I'm still in love with paper-bound.
The thicker the better.
The thicker the better, often, with leather covers, and never mind, that's a question for another day.
So those listening in audio, Rob is holding up what looks to be a black leather-bound, leather-covered Bible that says Holy Bible.
Like a Bible cover for the Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Bible cover because, of course, as you guys know, Bibles are expensive and people treasure them, and rightfully so, and they want to protect them. So often they'll get a Bible cover which protects their favorite.
Yeah. And this Bible cover says Holy Bible on it.
Does.
So you have no doubts what's inside.
Because we know the Trinity is Holy Father, Holy Son, and Holy Bible.
That's a discussion for another. No, exactly, and it's highly problematic. But this one tells you exactly what it is. It says Holy Bible on the front, has a nice cross embossed on the spine.
Beautiful.
Has a lovely carry handle so that you can free up your hands to do whatever else they do on church day.
You're looking real Christian if you're carrying this.
Well, and I have owned a number of these over the years, and I carried them into the pulpit. I'm an ordained minister. I preached 40 Sundays out of every year somewhere in America. I was a traveling evangelist preacher. I didn't preach in a congregational pulpit, but anyway, long story short is, kind of the best Bible carriers have a Bible cover to protect their favorite Bible.
Yep.
So what I'm holding in my hand now is this beautiful black faux leather. It's not real leather, but it looks like it and feels like it. And it's really quite a nice product. The only problem with this Bible cover is if you unzip it and it zips up to protect from dust and dirt and the elements.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
But when you open it up, there's no room inside for Holy Scripture. The
What's
only
inside?
What's in
thing
there? What's in
inside
there?
is
Oh,
a weapon,
That
a
tracks.
gun.
a semi-automatic handgun, because
Oof.
this Bible cover is actually made by a holster manufacturer in
Oh
Ohio
my.
called Garrison Grip. And
This
this
is
is
not a
one
real
of,
gun you're holding up right now, though, correct?
this is a plastic
I'm scared.
facsimile, but it's
Okay.
exactly the size, scale, feel of an
Whew.
actual weapon. And I use it for that reason, because some people would say, oh, come on, that couldn't really fit a real gun. Not only do they brag that it will fit your Glock 9mm, your Sig Sauer 226, but it has
Aw.
plenty of room for an extra magazine.
Oh,
So that-
wow.
so that you never, let's see, I forget.
Don't run
What
out
a
of those
feature.
bullets.
So that you never run out of bullets. You can have plenty of bullets
So you-
in church.
You
because
carry
it
the
has room.
sword of the Spirit and the gun of God.
I'm
And-
laughing only because I'm
Trying not to
aghast.
cry.
Yeah.
And here's the point, and of course, when I reveal this thing, often to a group of ministers, I will say in respecting the Second Amendment, we
Mm.
have to be careful that we're not violating the second commandment against idolatry. This is a form of idolatry. This is saying, I don't rely on God to save me or protect me. I rely on my weapon. And that's what replaces the promises in Holy Scripture. So for me, this is a case of apostasy. This is abandoning the faith. And so is Christian nationalism, which replaces devotion to country, or at least our imagination of what the country is, and to a particular governmental form, and now to a political personality. These are idols. They violate the commandment to worship God and God only. So this is part of the problem. And of course, the idolatry includes the imagination of the best culture for that country. And the best culture in people's minds is 1950s America, where white, mostly Anglo-Saxon Protestants rule the day, suppress others, have all the right answers, and because of that, they are superior to others, and others are to be subservient. And
You could
that's
even
the
say they are
vision.
supremacist over others.
And that's why,
Right.
I mean, I know people say, oh, come on, you're beating this thing about white supremacy. We don't believe that we're better. Critical thinking is not really part of American evangelical culture.
Yeah.
Nope.
And you guys were taught this. I learned this in Bible college. To question these things is to question God. To question God is a form of rebellion. Rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, which means you are an instrument of Satan. And who wants to be an instrument of Satan? And this is the way it works.
Yeah.
And yet God himself, God says through the prophet Isaiah, come, let us reason together, says the Lord. And I ask my colleagues and my friends now, does that sound reasonable? Is that reasonable? Does that comport with reason? Because God says, come, let us reason together. So that's the end.
I found
Go ahead.
a verse years ago that hit me that I had never seen before. And now I don't. It's either John 11 or Luke 11. I can't remember. But Jesus has raised Lazarus from the dead, created quite a stir. And so the religious leaders get together. And I always like to say, this is not an anti-Semitic thing. These weren't like Jewish community leaders. These were people who I think were bastardizing a Jewish religion, just as evangelicals do with Christianity today. But they say if Jesus keeps going on doing what he's doing, people are going to believe in him. And if they do, we will lose our temple and we will lose our country. It is the exact same mindset. Like, we are the keepers of our race, religion, and country. And we have to be in charge of the country so that God's plan can exist on earth, since we are his favorite country. They were make Israel great again believers.
You
And
know,
we're following that path today.
I make the point in Rob Reiner's film, God and Country, that when I was in Bible school, and that's what we had, we didn't do regular college and university because, you know, that would rob you of your faith. So we went to Bible schools, and I went to a lovely Bible school, Elam Bible Institute in Lima, New York. And one of my instructors used to say, never preach a sermon without consulting Kittel, meaning Gerhard Kittel, who was the editor of the Dictionary of New Testament Theology, which I still have on my shelf behind me, and every evangelical preacher has one. Every evangelical Bible college, seminary, Bible institute has Gerhard Kittel. Nobody ever told me. It took me a lifetime to discover that Gerhard Kittel was Adolf Hitler's resident theologian who gave him theological justification for the annihilation of the Jews, for genocide, for human genocide.
Wow.
Now, why didn't we ever know that? Well, first of all, a lot of people did know that. They just didn't find it convenient to talk about.
Yeah.
And when you look at that, one of Kittel's projects for Hitler was the development of a theological institute that suggested Jesus had shed his Jewish nature and emerged as an Aryan savior.
Oh my
As the
gosh.
quintessentially white European savior. And that was one of their projects. Well, in the minds of many, many evangelicals, if you look back at what a Levantine Jew of that period looked like, he would have had Afro-textured hair, very dark complected, with Northern African features. He was a man of color, small of stature, easily identified as an Afro heritage person. But who did we replace him with? A beautiful,
too beautiful, really.
Blue-eyed,
blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryan. So all
Jesus
of
was a
this,
good-looking guy. April, you were going to ask something. I want to run the trailer for the movie, but I want you to get your question in first.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's a comment / question, but I want to get your take on, I guess, my opinion is I think one of the hardest challenges in stopping Christian nationalism is how interconnected and intertwined it is with just American evangelicalism, that you can't really tell where one starts and one ends. Like I mean, my dad was a traveling evangelist when I was growing up. So we traveled around in a motorhome, and I just thought we were really good Christians, you know, voted Republican. We were conservative, loved God, loved people, you know, exceptions apply. But like, I didn't realize until the last few years, like I think when I turned 30, which I guess was 6 years ago, gross, was that, oh shoot, I was a Christian nationalist. And it's taken this, I think there are a lot of people who just think they're being good Christians, but are actually espousing Christian nationalism. Do you see that as well?
very much so. There are victims and victimizers. There are good people, and there are nefarious perpetrators.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes you think you're looking at one, but you're actually looking at another. And just as we've been saying, nothing is simplistic, not when it not when it involves human beings. People are very complex. There are good-hearted people who have gotten swept up in this thing, who have they've been oriented a certain way, they've been frightened.
Mhm.
Fear is a major tool within American evangelical subculture. How don't you dare, you can't think this, you can't ask this, you dare not do this, don't talk to these people, don't go with these people, don't listen to this,
Yeah.
don't read that. There's an enormous amount of fear. And my father was Jewish.
Mm.
My mother converted to Judaism to marry him, but really had no personal faith of her own. But they raised four of us, four kids, to not be afraid to search out the truth, to ask questions, to interrogate things, to be inquisitive, curious, and I'm very grateful to them too late in life for that.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it's why I went on a search that landed me in an evangelical church where I heard the preaching of the message and responded to that. But here's my story. I made my Christian profession of faith in a little country church with a pastor who was a Salvation Army officer, licensed by the Methodist denomination, but who secretly was a gay man, forbidden from being himself, from even facing himself.
Mm.
But I look back now and I realize in my formation, he left something behind for me in his invisibility. It chokes me up to think about this because
Mhm.
his ministry was so rich, and he continues to be a model for me as for what a Christian and what a minister should be. And I say that because all along the way, I encountered people like this, and I quietly kept a lot of doubt in my own mind. And sometimes I would sit backstage at a big mega church and see what they were doing and saying, and just say, this is so bad. This is so wrong. But I never gave voice to it. But my children did not have the benefit of that.
Mm.
They were submerged into it. And today, both of my kids, now adults, independent, living their own lives, say to me, Dad, you have no idea the torture, the oppression, the fear that was instilled in
Mhm.
us
Yeah.
in those times. Fear of hell, fear of demons, fear of damnation,
The rapture.
fear of the rapture, fear
Yeah.
of disappointing God, fear of doing the wrong thing, fear of
Yeah.
saying the wrong thing, fear of thinking the wrong thing, fear of asking the wrong question. And yet the Bible tells us that we're not to live a life of fear.
Right.
Mhm. I think
Perfect love casts out fear,
Yes,
right?
out fear.
well,
Yes,
I think
perfect
that's
love.
something that's so frustrating to me too. Like I do a lot of deconstruction stuff as being raised by two parents who I was in that and was raised with all of that fear as well. And when you talk about it, it the evangelicals that are Christian nationalists, they come back and they say those verses. Well, perfect. God doesn't give us a spirit of fear. Like they know the verses to just put a band-aid on what you're saying. Like, well, you're stupid. You shouldn't have had fear. Like if you had like a true Christian wouldn't have felt that fear. Like it's just so dismissive. But the fact of
AKA gaslighting. Yes.
right, but the fact of the matter is they are the ones creating this environment that is making children terrified for
Terrified.
just like I don't know how many like I still have a slight fear of being hit by a bus because that was the death of choice usually for altar calls. Like if you leave tonight and you get hit by a bus on the way home, do you have the assurance of salvation that you're going? But that was like a mild fear on the list of fears. And then one time I actually thought I was left behind from the rapture for like 20 minutes. That
That's a terrifying 20 minutes. That's a
it was
traumatizing 20 minutes.
I mean, I laugh about it now, but I literally was planning in my head, psyching myself up to refuse the mark of the beast and knowing that I would get my head chopped off. And I was 13. And I was like, it's fine. It'll be just a quick, painless death. I can do it. That's not okay.
Mm.
That's not normal.
Yeah.
It's not okay, and it deserves interrogation. And that's where it goes wrong because, yes, all those Bible verses will be used as weapons to control and dominate and dismiss. But the invitation is not given. So let's talk about the meaning of that. How do each of you see it?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's woven into the culture. Preaching, for example, is a one-way form of communication. There's no invitation for questioning.
Yep.
I've known very few preachers who have sat on a stool and invited questions on the sermon.
And if you ask too many questions, you're told not to doubt God's anointed.
All techniques of domination and control, human domination and control.
Yeah. Which and I love Romans 12:2 is almost my favorite Bible verse now. Don't be conformed to the age. I think if
Yeah.
we wrote that verse today, it would be, don't be conformed to your echo chamber or your groupthink, but be transformed by the never-ending renewing of your mind so you can know
Well, you
what is
have
good and
y-
right.
in fundamentalist circles, you have to have a black and white theology because nuance is a dogma killer. If you
Yeah.
allow nuance in, your theology goes away.
So Rob is with us. He is in this new film called God and Country. I want to show the trailer real quick so people can get a feel for it and hopefully find a way to see it somewhere at a theater near you. I got to see it a couple of nights ago and it's really cool. Let me see. Where is it now? There it is. Okay, let's look at the trailer from God and Country. If I can play it, how do I do that?
I
Talk amongst
believe in you.
yourselves.
I believe in you, Paul.
Talk amongst yourselves. Oops.
Nationalist, I have nothing to be ashamed of.
An evangelical minister.
Christian nationalism, Christian.
It's pretty quiet.
No,
Is
on
it?
my end. Yeah, I can't really hear it.
Is about the values of inclusion. Christian nationalism is certainly not based on the values of the gospel.
Christian nationalism uses Christianity as a means to an end in some form of authoritarianism.
They're told over and over and over again that you're in danger. You need to fight.
This is not a movement about Christian values. This is about Christian power.
We're taking our nation.
The thing that keeps me up at night is that we lose democracy.
Does that seem possible?
Yes.
So that's the movie. Sorry if the sound was low there, but how'd you get involved with this, Rob?
I received a call or maybe an email from the director, Dan Partlin, who did an excellent job with this. And he asked me if I would give him some time on camera to talk about this phenomenon of Christian nationalism. And I sat, I think it was for hours. I sat for hours and we talked about this. You won't see that much of me in the film, thank God. Get a little old. But, you know, it was a very rich conversation. Dan is truly curious and, you know, is intellectually astute and spiritually sensitive. He's really got depth to him. And then I think it was late in the project that Rob Reiner actually came in with an infusion of enthusiasm and support and financing, which really helped the project.
The Christian nationalists were pretty mad about that. I saw them.
Yeah,
making some
even though so many of them just loved him as Michael in
All in the
All
Family.
in the Family. Yeah, in the 70s, we all grew up with Michael. And then these are the secrets. And this is the thing too, you know, in all my years hobnobbing shoulder to shoulder with many of the major figures, you'll see them in the film, who brought forward, at least prepared the way for this Christian nationalist takeover, if not are leading it today.
Mhm.
I can tell you they all have secrets, and I know some of them. They live double standards, double lives. And one of the reasons is it goes to yet another operative Bible verse. The love of money is the root of all evil is a
Yeah.
important verse in the New Testament. And money is a form of power.
Yeah.
You can certainly dominate and subjugate people with money. You can certainly deny them the truth and create fictions and gaslight using money. And this is what my fundraisers used to tell me when I was in the movement. And I talk about this in the film. Give us more fear and more anger. I remember one fundraising executive saying to me, if I have a little fear, I can raise a little money for you. If I have a lot of fear, I can raise a lot of money. So I need to make your people afraid to go to sleep at night and mad as hell at the world.
Mm.
And I will bring the money in for you. And that's the way you do it. That's the way. And the money then allows you political influence,
Yeah.
which gives you ownership. And this is the main reason people say, I knew Mike Johnson. I knew him as a congressman. I knew the world he came from, the organizations that he worked for before he became a member of Congress and now Speaker of the House. And people ask, why do these people go down to Mar-a-Lago and kiss the ring of Donald Trump? Why are they doing this? Well, there's both a very complex and a very simple answer to that. Donald Trump, with his diabolical genius, saw an opportunity. Many times these vast databases of major and minor donors to the Republican Party and the crossover into the Christian ministry world aren't really owned by anybody. They kind of exist in a netherworld where people swap and trade and rent and sell the names of donors to each other in batches of 100,000, 1 million, 3 million, 5 million. And once they get bored, once these donors get bored, they become lapsed, what are called lapsed donors. And those are then sold to a new organization and stimulated again with a new message using fear and anger to awaken them.
Oh, wow.
Well, Donald Trump grabbed those databases. And at least the people around him were smart enough to say they all cross over with each other. So the conservative Christian ministries have the same people that the new Republican Party, the MAGA Republican Party has. All you have to do is threaten to badmouth one of those Christian ministry figures, and it will rob them of 20% of their donor base, and it will put them into bankruptcy. It will bury them overnight. The same with every member of Congress trying to raise money for his or her next primary election has to go to those same databases. You badmouth that candidate, and you will rob them of 25% of their donors, and it will end their political careers. Every one of them are beholden to the silver spoon that he now owns and controls completely. And the bottom line is, it's a sellout to mammon.
Yeah.
Jesus said you can't serve God and the dollar. And it's all in this toxic mix. And I've probably said enough for tonight, so I better get off the course. But you can see that I got one.
And I think we never want to become the other side of the same coin and use fear to move people. And so I think sometimes we're overly gracious, and we don't want to make the comparisons to 1930s Germany or 1950s America. But I think the danger is real. And like the person in that trailer, do you think democracy can be overturned by Christian nationalism? Yes. Like, she didn't hesitate for a second. It is a real thing. And I was telling these two before we came on, I have, some of our best friends in Christianity. One of them was the first one that ever mentioned the word QAnon to me. Wonderful, loving, smart Christian people. And now he posts on his Facebook page every day things about setting up guillotines on Pennsylvania Avenue to execute Democrats. And we've been building toward it for a long time, and it's a very highly motivated, easily movable people, as Donald Trump found out and was able to capitalize on. So I think there is, I don't want to put fear into people, but I think there is a real danger that's coming from, I can't believe, coming from my people, you know, as you've had to do penance, we've had to penance, like I was a part of that and getting here. And so now I have to add my voice to being part of trying to stop it from happening.
And that's part of the repair work. That's what I'm trying to do. And we'll get it done. And I do believe there's enough good people to the core who are sincere. They want to do what's right and good, but they've been intimidated and frightened into not doing it, and frightened into doing the opposite. So let's do it, because yes, I understand, you know, we want to be cautious and careful and sober, but the fact is that one of the most popular Bible teachers in 1930s Germany, Paul Althaus, who was as popular as any television preacher as Joel Osteen, I mean, a popular guy, made a pronouncement in April of 1933 when Adolf Hitler ascended to the chancellorship in Germany. He declared Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party a gift and miracle from God.
Ugh, gross.
How did that work out? And it's a question that should trouble all of us in our sleep.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fascinating, and I know you think you say too much, but somebody there at the roots of this telling us how you've seen this, I think, has been really fascinating tonight, and very important for people to hear.
And I feel like we barely scratched the surface too. Could talk hours and hours and hours on this topic.
Cue the, we'll have to have you back.
Yeah.
If you can stand it.
Yeah. Rob, where can people find you if they want to follow your work?
I'm on Pathos at Truth Revealed. That's where I post and write. You know, again, I consult and teach for the Miller Center for Interreligious Learning and Leadership at Hebrew College outside Boston, but I live in the Washington, D.C. area. So on occasion, you can find me at Aldi. I love to grocery shop at Aldi. Look for me there. It's great food and it's cheap.
I'm an Aldi fan as well.
Oh, great.
I always have my quarter with me.
Yes, you have to have your quarter.
We're Trader Joe's people here. So.
Trader Joe's is great. I wish we had one near us. We don't.
Gotcha. And the movie God and Country, do you know how, is it going to be widely released, or how is that going to work?
Yeah, I know it's going to be at Vudu. You're going to be able to rent it or buy it at Vudu. I don't know if it will stream on other platforms. I mean, the plan is always it will, but I'm not in on that kind of stuff. But watch for it. Vudu will tell you, and just Google it. It'll show up on streaming. It's in theaters right now, so it has to go through the theater run. And you can see it at select theaters around the country. Regal, I think, is one. So look for it, but then it'll come online shortly.
Awesome.
Everybody check it out. It's definitely worth watching. Thanks again, Rob. We appreciate you coming on and joining us. It was great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's great fun to be with you guys, even though the subject ain't so fun.
That's right. It's important to talk about, and we appreciate your time. So thank you for being with us. All right, everybody, we will be here next week again, next Wednesday. So join us and have a great week. We'll see you later.
Actually, the guest next week is me.
Is you. Yeah.
And Jenna Kraft. We're going to talk about mental well-being, and I think we're going to entitle it "Wonderfully and Fearfully Weird" as our topic next week. So don't miss it.
Nice. All right, y'all have a great week.
Good night, everyone.